Here's our sportsNOLA.com trivia question. Sunday marking the 13th time with the Saints that Drew Brees has had 3 picks. Against which opponent has Brees suffered the most? Well, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Our panel was correct 4 times. Process of elimination, we had 3 considerations. So that Tampa 2 defense, it's named after Tampa Bay, so why not? There it is. Let's hope Drew Brees can find a way not to continue that trend as the Saints have to take on Tampa Bay this week. Ken Trahan, sportsNOLA.tv. It is time now for our hot seat segment where we place Brian Alley Walsh on the hot seat with a hot topic of the day. Should the college football playoff be limited to including only conference champions? Brian, the floor is yours.
As always, Dr. Trahan, thank you so much. And by the way, just so our viewers will know this, I'm going for my 100th consecutive win over Ricky in the Hot Topic contest. Kenny told me about that before the topic.
True.
All right. To me, this is a pretty simple one. And Ricky doesn't like me to look down at my notes, but I'm going to anyway. To me, the purpose of this 12-person committee is to identify the 4 best teams. Period. End of story. 4 best teams, no matter how you arrive at it. Now, over the months, we have been told in the public that the criteria seems to be 1, conference championships, head-to-head matchups, strength of schedule, common opponents. 4 criteria, right? Apparently the rub against the committee, though, is that the how you view Ohio State. They're not a conference champion. In fact, Ohio State didn't even win its division. Division, okay? So that's the rub against this committee. But there's also something when you get a 12-person committee, it's all about subjectivity. That means everybody, there are guidelines in which to follow, but there's subjectivity involved, and everybody goes about it in a different way. The eye test is a very valid criteria, all right? They determined, the 12-person committee determined that the Buckeyes are unequivocally better than the team that was probably under other consideration, either being Washington or Penn State, which ended up winning the Big Ten championship. A great analogy was made by one of the committee members, that each season is a snowflake. There are no 2 snowflakes or no 2 seasons alike. The whole idea of this 12-person committee is to identify the 4 best teams. In my opinion, they did that. Alabama, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. Everybody else is an also-ran. If I had a strong opinion about this, I would say let's increase the playoffs from 4 to 8, and then we'll have another set of dynamics to consider.
That's too much of football, 4 to 8. They did it right, and they might have missed out on either Michigan or Washington. Those are 2 teams because Penn State lost 2 games, so it's hard to put them in there. One team, 1 loss would have been all right, but they try to get a team with 2 losses. And conference championship don't mean anything because one thing about a conference championship, you can win every game in your conference and lose all the rest of the game that is non-conference game. So now you got a 6-6 record. So you can't put that in the national championship game. So my whole thing was they got it right pretty near. I mean, could have either went Michigan or Wisconsin, either way up, and it wouldn't have made a big difference with me. But I understand how the team that were left out feel, but they got it right. Oklahoma was good down the stretch, but USC beat them, but they still lost 2 games, and Penn State lost a couple of games. So you left USC out, and they lost a couple of games. So they got it pretty near right. Maybe one team could have went in, either Washington or Michigan, but they got it right.
Ricky, I wouldn't have quibbled. I wouldn't have quibbled with this. I wouldn't have quibbled had they put Penn State ahead of Washington. Either way, I just wouldn't have quibbled with that. Okay?
No, that's what I'm saying. The 4th team, either if you'd have put Michigan there, you really couldn't have said much. Or USC there, you really couldn't have said no, Penn State. So that's the only thing that 4th team was the only team that really was a X factor.
Right.
Well, the question was real simple. Should the college football playoff include only conference champions? The question wasn't about snowflakes, and it wasn't about who the best teams are. The question was, should you put conference championships only in the playoff system? And the answer is yes. Very simply, yes. That's why you play the season. What do you have a conference for? Why do you have great leagues like the SEC or the Big 12 or the Big 10 or any of the others for that matter? You play for championships and you get there. LSU fans know this all too well, going back to what happened in January of 2012. Alabama didn't even win its own division in its conference, as Brian just talked about with Ohio State. And yet they got an opportunity to not only play in the national championship without a playoff, by the way, but also to play the LSU team that had already beaten them at their own place. LSU had a historic season. You go back and look at who they beat that year to go unbeaten. It was maybe the best performance in a regular season by any team in history of college football. The problem was they had to play a great team a second time and had no chance to beat them, as it turned out, for that second time. I completely understand Ricky's point about conference champions can have bad out-of-conference records, but again, that's why you play for the championships. Ohio State is clearly one of the top 3 teams in the country right now by virtue of their fortunate win over Michigan. We might be singing a different tune otherwise if they mark something correctly, by the way, which they didn't do. That said, conference champions should be the rub here. Washington's in there for one reason. They're a conference champion. Did you look at their schedule? Do you really think that their schedule merited them being one of the top 4 teams in the country? I think Alabama's going to expose them. I'm just saying. Meanwhile, Ohio State and Clemson, that figures to be a good matchup and a fun one at that. But at the end of the day, I think we're all just whistling whatever tune you want to whistle because Alabama's going to win the national championship, in my humble opinion. When we return in just a moment, we'll talk college and prep football as Sports NOLA TV continues.